I used to think that inclusion was placing students from special schools into mainstream classrooms, and partly that is true, but it is now a lot more than that. At Taroona High School in the year 2000, for the first time it was a big deal that 2 students diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder were being included in our middle school program. At the time, when I was an executive member of the AEU, we had a lot of discussions about the needs of special students in classrooms and also the needs of classroom teachers. We talked about funding for additional support, we talked about class sizes, and we talked about needing additional support staff. We compared our state, Tasmania obviously, to the percentage of students who were included in other states, and we found that in Tasmania we were higher. Would it be possible to teach these students adequately? What about the mainstream students? We were worried about all of these concerns. The SDR had cut-off numbers that seemed to be too low to us. In the mainland states, the numbers were higher. We tried to get some additional numbers on those from 50 to 70, but we were only able to get an additional 5 points, making the IQ cut-off numbers for the SDR register at 55. There are many debatable points in some of the discussions that we had at that time, but the discussions did not tackle the real issue, which was practiced exclusion, nor did it adequately consider the needs of excluded students. Australia is a signatory to international conventions relating to human rights, anti-discrimination and special needs education. The Disability Discrimination Act of 1992 contains the Disability Standards for Education 2005. The DDA makes it unlawful to discriminate against people with disabilities in education and in the community in general. The standards require that all education providers make reasonable adjustments for students with disabilities. So, isn't inclusive education about disability? If it's not about disability, what is inclusive education? A review of inclusive education in an international context relates how contentious the term is. Authors prefer a definition used by UNESCO. This is, education is not simply about making schools available for those who are already able to access them. It is about being proactive in identifying the barriers and obstacles learners encounter in attempting to access opportunities for quality education, as well as in removing those barriers and obstacles that lead to exclusion. The key ideas here are that education departments, schools and teachers need to be proactive in identifying barriers to learning as well as removing obstacles that lead to exclusion. A major concern for teachers is that in 2015 a review of the standards made this very significant point, that barriers to accessing the curriculum remain that relate to teaching practice. Inclusive education has changed from the initial focus on including students with disabilities to a new emphasis on opportunities in education for all, with a focus on diversity. The Australian states provide policies and guidelines for education of diverse student needs, and in 2008 the Melbourne Declaration made a point of this. Now, the Melbourne Declaration lists a number of students. They are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. They are people from diverse cultural backgrounds who do not speak English as a first language. They are students from low socio-economic backgrounds and also students with special needs, and that includes our gifted students. The curriculum also refers to diversity, and it talks about the curriculum being flexible in being able to support this. It is considered that 10% of the population are gifted and therefore will be represented in diverse classes and are represented equally across marginalised groups. Who are these students? How might we cater to their needs? The Department of Education website gives us the following information about students who are gifted and talented. They state that the top 10% in a similar age range in at least one domain are gifted. That could be intellectual, physical, creative or social. Students whose performance lies in the top 10% of a similar age in at least one domain, intellectual, physical, creative or social, can be referred to as being talented. Students can vary from being mildly gifted, which is quite common, through to being highly gifted, which is quite rare. Some gifted students are very capable just in one area, for example mathematics or music, while others are exceptional across a range of areas. It is possible to have a physical or learning disability at the same time as being gifted. Gifted students often learn faster and in more complex ways than their peers. Significant adjustment to the educational program of highly gifted students is necessary to meet their learning needs. Research shows that without challenging learning opportunities, gifted students may not reach their potential and are at risk of becoming bored and disengaged from learning. Principals and teachers work with school psychologists and in some cases tertiary education providers to ensure a gifted student is supported and fulfilled. The DOE provides a range of extension activities outside classrooms to assist the engagement and opportunities for students who have these abilities and are able to take advantage of the opportunities. The model of giftedness widely adopted in Australia is Gagne's differentiated model of giftedness and talent. Maroczy, 2014, strongly endorses authors who warn against identification of giftedness and who argue for a more inclusive approach to classroom practice. He describes IQ testing for a diagnosis of giftedness, making outstanding ability sound like a disease. I agree that when considering whether to identify students who are gifted, the purpose should be carefully scrutinised. Borland in 2005 argued that instruction should cause giftedness to emerge, and Renzulli 2005 warned against identification for status conferred by IQ testing. Carrington and MacArthur support views like the previous authors with a compelling case for radical education reform through the framework of inclusive education. They highlight that schooling is an apprenticeship in democracy and that education has the power to change society. Carrington describes that a school community reflects the makeup of society with its diversity and mirrors society's challenges. These words resonate with me, and I find myself inspired by their approach to the challenge of eliminating inequality and standing for reform to address exclusion. Simple acts begin the process of beating down the wall, the barrier of exclusion that towers over us and keeps us apart. One such simple act is considering our words by using people-first language. People-first language acknowledges the person first and not the disability or ability. People are disabled by a society that takes no account of people who have impairments and excludes them, says Oliver, who was in the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, quoted in 1976. You might have noticed that I actually include ability here with disability. Why would I do that? Maroczy, 2014, describes students whose gifts are invisible as those who do not perform at their ability and have a variety of reasons for this, including low self-esteem, peer pressure, family pressure, fear of failure or distrust of the education system, just to name a few. A consideration of sociology is important here to help us understand how students who are gifted can remain invisible and not be reaching their potential. Social constructionism is understanding that knowledge and meaning are constructed through interactions between people. Socially constructed meanings might look like how we understand the characteristics of people, such as gender, sexuality, race, class, or ability. Much of what we take for granted is viewed differently by people who live in different cultures or are part of a marginalised group, and it is clear that beliefs and views change over time. In education, a particularly influential social construction is the idea of what is normal. Different authors outline a number of sociological theories that connect the ideas of language having the power to shape our thoughts. If we understand how important language is, we might hear and know which words shape the lives of our students and ourselves. The values we hold shape who we are and determine how we relate to each other. And it is this values lens that determines how we become more inclusive. If a teacher does not believe they are responsible for teaching all students, their attitude is a barrier to inclusion. In Tasmania, when considering the needs of students who are gifted, the first expectation, as outlined by the DOE, is that teachers provide quality, differentiated teaching practice. This is supported in the literature, where curriculum for outstanding students is first supported through differentiated curriculum, practices that better meet the needs of all students. I propose that in order to support the student who is invisibly gifted, a focus on two areas should be implemented in our school. Professional learning to support the implementation of universal design for learning and a focus on mindset. UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is a framework designed to proactively remove barriers to learning. When learning occurs within this framework, it facilitates access for all. UDL classrooms support multiple ways for students to represent information, differentiates the way that students can express what they know, and focuses on ways to engage and motivate learners. A 10-year longitudinal study conducted by Carol Dweck shows that streaming and grouping students by ability works counter to student achievement. A belief that intelligence is fixed is a barrier to student motivation and inclusive practice. A fixed growth mindset is detrimental to student achievement. The attitudes and beliefs of teachers with a fixed growth mindset is also detrimental to student achievement. Neuroscience shows that the brain is plastic and responds to effort and grows in intelligence. A growth mindset understands that everyone's ability can grow. Students can learn how to grow their intelligence with supports and education in a growth mindset philosophy. Maths is a subject most affected by a fixed mindset philosophy. Learning takes time and is a product of effort. Students deemed less smart improve performance in maths in a growth mindset classroom. Supported by the growth mindset, the way mistakes are treated has a significant impact on students. I use a dot for marking in all classes as a not yet indicator. This can become a powerful tool for learning. Mistakes grow brain synapses. The message we learn by making mistakes can be strengthened and celebrated for greater effort. The research is a revolution, states Bowler, 2013, for students who think they are dummies and for school systems that stream. The consequences for students with a fixed mindset are that they characteristically are afraid of looking silly when getting things wrong, so avoid challenges. They give up easily when learning becomes hard. They believe that because they are intelligent, schoolwork should be easy for them, and more devastating, look easy for them to others. If they have to try hard, this makes them feel like an imposter. Students with a fixed mindset see effort as a waste of time. They ignore useful feedback and feel threatened by other people's success. This particularly affects students who deem themselves superior in intelligence to their peers. Dweck's research studies show that instead of revealing possible weaknesses, students choose to avoid challenges and give up opportunities where they could excel. The opposite is true for people with a growth mindset philosophy who embrace challenges, keep going even when it's hard, see effort as the journey to success, learn from feedback, and are inspired by the success of others. Teachers with a fixed mindset have a negative impact on students and unwittingly have a significant negative impact on students' learning potential. It is within this context that the power of words to promote improved self-esteem to achieve gains in learning for individuals should be attended to by educators. The fixed mindset of educators reduces the learning potential of gifted students. Introducing the knowledge of how the brain works and learns empowers students and has been shown to motivate the most disengaged students.